Trust is an important aspect in life that gives us hope for safety and security. But as life goes on and we take a step back, we can realize that trust can easily fall into the wrong hands, which was proven by the events that took place during the Cold War era. The human radiation experiments that undertook throughout the Cold War was motivated by the United States fearing that the Soviet Union's knowledge of radiation and atomic weapons would put the U.S. at a disadvantage. So this made the U.S. and its military highly motivated to learn anything they could about radiation and its effects on people faster than their opponents. But when doing so, they ended up putting the population at risk. Today I'm here to tell you about the effects of the human radiation experiments that occurred on society during the Cold War era. After spending countless hours investigating this topic, I'm confident to share this information with you today. Through the course of this speech, one will be able to take away the important events of history that have been kept in secret from society, enabling one to question their trust within the government. I will be explaining the effects of these experiments by touching on two of its negative factors, being its sacrificing citizens' safety and violating human rights, as well as touching on one beneficial outcome being the advancements it made for military and medical fields. Now that I've shortly summarized what I'll cover today, let me begin by explaining my first point, sacrificing citizen safety. Those involved didn't fully consider the well-being of the experimental subjects, nor anyone that could be affected. They just wanted to find out the effects of radiation on the human body. This was revealed as the government allowed experiments to be done on various groups of people who were unaware during the 1940s and 1970s. In Atomic Guinea Pig by David Jones, he states that researchers exposed over 200,000 people to potentially harmful radioactivity, revealing that the Cold War spawned an orgy of human experimentation. An example of one of the experiments is the plutonium injection studies. Within this, they injected 18 cancer patients with plutonium without informing them and without there being any expected benefits for the individual, primarily out of research purpose. In addition, other experiments spread radiation over large areas to evaluate its toxicity. At least 7 major studies on downwinders, which are those people who were exposed to radioactive toxins that were transported through the air or by wind. Within this, there was an association found between radioactive fallout from bomb tests in Nevada and an increase in leukemia within those people who live in that area, which was stated by Michael McCallie in his research. This was also proven as the experiments were stalled due to the signing of the Limited Nuclear Weapons Test Ban Treaty to stop the spread of these toxins. Now that I've given you some examples to explain how individuals have been negatively affected by the human radiation experiment, let's take a look at how their human rights were too. Many researchers and the government used the emergence of atomic weapons as an excuse to disregard human rights during their experiments. Since the government was keeping the experiments and information a secret, citizens lost trust in the system when they realized that the government was taking illegal and unconstitutional actions on them. David Jones expressed that researchers concerned about bad publicity and legal liability concealed their work by classifying it as top secret when it wasn't. This level of secrecy is seen in every case, as the information of injecting countless patients with radiation was withheld, as well as not informing everyone in those areas that would be exposed to it from the nuclear weapon tests. There were 2 human rights that were clearly violated within each of their experiments, these being right to life and no torture. The right to life is what it sounds like. It's the right to life, to live in freedom and safety. But as the government and doctors refused to share their information, 700,000 people either became unsafe or lost their life. The second is the right to no torture, which embodies the idea that no one has the right to hurt us, which was violated by the doctors who have the medical responsibility to first do no harm by hiding the nature of injections from their own patients and not following up on their progresses, explained by an article by the Atomic Heritage Foundation. Now that I've told you 2 reasons how the experiments challenge society, which are sacrificing the safety of citizens and violating their human rights, let's address one beneficial outcome that came from these tests. Although they were major consequences, the experimental results help scientists understand radiation sickness, advancing science and healthcare. The information gathered from these experiments led to the establishment of the Advisory Committee on X-ray and Radium Protection. In Kerr's writing in the Journal of Clinical and Diagnostic Research, he explains how scientists have now learned that radiation in smaller doses can be beneficial. The doctors also now use X-rays broadly all over the world and other radiation-based technologies, allowing them to quickly diagnose broken bones or other illnesses without using experimental surgeries. In addition, safe levels of radiation were defined by the Atomic Energy Regulatory Board for medical technicians and workers at nuclear power facilities. In 1936, the recommended radiation tolerance was 6.5, and with more research, within 5 years later, in 1941, it was realized that it should be 0.1. This also gave insight on how close soldiers and other workers could operate to areas exposed to high levels of radioactivity. To conclude, I offer you a second look at this information. As I've informed you about the effects that the human radiation experiments have had on society during the Cold War era, I want to remind you again of the important factors that make up the entire historical event. First, how the government and scientists sacrificed the safety of their citizens for research gain. Second, the violations of human rights endorsed by those running the experiments. And lastly, how the human radiation experiments advanced the military and medical fields through its findings, making the systems more effective today. After seeing how trust can easily be placed in the wrong hands within the choices the government and scientists made for society during that time, it is safe to say to always question your trust and safety, especially with those who have a higher motivation than your own well-being.